Back to another segment of the Grassy Knoll. This is being recorded on February 20th, 2005. We have with us Philip D. Collins coming back again to give us another installment of the multi-part series entitled Magicians of Mutability. Both Philip and his brother Paul co-authored the book The Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship, an examination of epistemic autocracy from the 19th to the 21st century. They also collaborated on another book, Philip as the editor, Paul as the author, that's titled The Hidden Face of Terrorism. You'll find many of their articles up on biped.info, and that is, quote, the official website of Darwinian Descent and Conspiracy Archive. And I want to welcome you back, Philip, to the Grassy Knoll. Thanks for being with us again.
Thanks for having me back.
What I'd like to do is, before we go into this fourth segment, maybe clean up a little old business, if you will. I got some questions for you from a listener.
Sure.
Also, I want to know, are there any new articles that are forthcoming from you or Paul?
Currently, I'm working on a new article which will trace the semiotic lineage of the truncated pyramid and all-seeing eye from its first appearance on the dollar bill to its reappearance and resurgence today with the Total Information, or now Terrorist Information Awareness Program.
Yeah, that was actually, I think they may have changed that, but wasn't that the logo?
Yes, as a matter of fact, yes, it was the logo, and I find it especially interesting that it should experience a resurgence today under an administration that's pervaded by neoconservatism, which qualifies as a variant of technocracy. And of course, when it made its appearance on our currency, that was under FDR's administration, which was an administration that initially received the sanction of the technocratic movement as well. So I think there's a continuity of thought there.
This isn't really that important. If you want to give your opinion or address this, by all means. But I had read and really don't have a problem believing that design was of the truncated pyramid and the all-seeing eye was given to Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, there's been reports that may have been the case, and its sources are a bit etchy and everything.
Mm-hmm.
They're a little bit foggy, but then again, you're always going to have a certain degree of fogginess on the origin of these these symbols and from whence they came. Of course, deciphering their meaning though is an entirely different matter. And when you begin to pick up on the fact that there's a design in there, then that's when the symbol is especially important.
I have to tell you, though, one of the best icebreakers there is for talking to people about what's going on who have no idea as of yet, and that is to take a dollar bill and go over it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a whole smorgasbord of things there. I mean, just on one side alone, it's replete with symbols, with codes and what have you, and all of it, semiotically, again, it gesticulates towards something bigger. And I don't think that they would have, had it placed on the dollar bill unless it was supposed to infer something greater and of a grander scale.
Well, what I think is probably the most minute symbol on the dollar bill, but the one that I think is the most heinous. Are you familiar with that little owl?
Yes, the little owl, yeah.
Going back to Moloch. I mean,
mm-hmm.
what a... Oof.
I recently read an article which may have placed the Moloch, the identity of Moloch in question, but nonetheless places the owl in the trajectory of certain occult beliefs. I'm not. The court's still out on my end with that, but the simple fact that the owl has been incorporated as part of the semiology and groups that have practiced child sacrifice, all the way back to antiquity, that remains a permanent fixture, that is part of the legacy of that symbol. And for it to be there on the dollar bill is truly disturbing.
Yeah, and a lot of people just shrug their shoulders and they wonder why. But I'll tell you what, even as kids we wondered why. But we just blew it off because you don't think of anything beyond just an image on a piece of paper.
Sure. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why semiotics is so important. I mean, because semiotics, it can't be qualified as the derisive stigma of quote unquote conspiracy theory. Semiotics began initially as just the study of human communication, and it approaches these symbols from a purely non-conspiratorial point of view, but nonetheless derive the same meaning. So, every symbol, everything that comprises human communication has meaning. And so, just to simply shrug it off and think, well, it's just a picture and they put it there, it's not the wisest thing to do.
Going back to the book that you and Paul co-wrote, what does the term epistemic autocracy mean? What was the concept behind that?
Certainly. Epistemic derived, of course, from the Greek root episteme, which means knowledge or knowing. And what we basically have today is an autocracy of the knowable. Basically, the elite want to enthrone one epistemology, one means of knowing. It's been largely a materialistic one. It's been largely premised upon metaphysical naturalism, and so that is the autocracy of the epistemic that we're witnessing. One knowledge, one science. Science also being derivative of the Latin root scientia, which also means knowing. So basically, the idea is that we only know what we know because they know it, and they get to tell us what we know and what we do not know.
Also, for the series that we're doing with you and Paul, The Magicians of Mutability, what were you hoping to embrace with that title?
Well, basically, the title it basically encapsulates the theme of mankind as an inherently mutable species. This is what the ruling class elite believe. Their doctrine is basically a doctrine of emergent deity, that humanity is in the process of becoming. The doctrine is also known as transformism, where we experience periods of transformation, and because we're inherently mutable, because we have this proclivity towards mutability, the elite feel it's their duty to facilitate our transformation, our mutation into something else. And the final ends of this alchemical mandate is the transmutation of humanity into a post-human creature, a creature that's no longer human, but is instead God. And you have numerous permutations of this belief throughout the 19th century and well into the 20th century. You have it with Hegel's Weltgeist. You have it with the many evolutionary theories that preceded Darwin, and then of course Darwinism that acted as the final conduit or transmission belt for the doctrine of transformism into the 20th and now well into the 21st century.
The first article I read from you, and the one that moved me to get in touch with you, the semiotic piece on 9/11, is the basis for an email I received. And if you don't mind,
sure,
I'll read you the comment and I'll ask you the questions. And if it's not that you have to speak to this, but I think that the emailer was interested in your opinion, whatever that should be.
Sure.
All right. The comment is the foreshadowing, conditioning, and psychopolitical programming for 9/11 were clearly evident in the mass media culture as well as in documents such as the Project for a New American Century, and even earlier quotes from such arch criminals as Kissinger. Tell me how you really feel. Anyway, go get him. Anyway, question 1. Philip, are you aware of other sources or documents that might represent likely, quote, screenplays for future, quote, engineered terrorist or other conditioning events?
Absolutely. Now, as for screenplays that would pretty much draw out the paradigmatic template for other terrorist events, I'd have to examine that a little further. But I do know that there are designs inherent, for instance, in the film 2001: Space Odyssey, which basically is the elite's the ruling class religion encapsulated within one film. That film basically reveals the designs that they hold for humanity, particularly with the appearance of the monolith, which of course appears intermittently through the film, and interestingly enough appeared in Magnuson Park on 2001. Nobody knows that there was a monolith or a replica of the monolith found in Magnuson Park, and of course that very same year 9/11 took place. And so what the monolith semiotically gesticulates towards, what it's a signpost for, is the next step in human evolution, the next quantum leap that the elite wish to take us on. And essentially now we have America's further transmogrification into a technocratic dictatorship, a scientific dictatorship, and we have humanity on its way towards more wars. And of course, according to their doctrine of transformism, wars further promulgate evolution, and into a brand new century of humanity continuing its evolutionary ascent towards apotheosis. So yes, I definitely see paradigmatic templates in other narratives.
And question number 2, speaking of monoliths of sorts, also I would like to hear your opinion on the origin and nature of the infamous Georgia Guidestones.
You know, the Georgia Guidestones are very, very interesting, because a lot of people have speculated as to where they come from and who made them. What is very interesting about the Georgia Guidestones is the fact that it reveals that inextricably linked with Malthusian depopulation agendas is a religious agenda as well, and the very use of the monolith, or I'm sorry, of the design from the
Guidestones.
Yeah, for the Guidestones. It's derivative of course the Druid
the Stonehenge.
Yeah, Stonehenge.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The Druid designs it infers semiotically sacrifice, and so essentially we have again the message that's being made is one of occult ritual, of sacrifice, and so the inference is that humanity, in order to maintain population stability, will have to make sacrifices, and will have to make these sacrifices in the name of a religious doctrine. And again, that doctrine, I personally believe, is a doctrine of transformism that basically holds that man is on his way to becoming something else, and of course, on his way to becoming something else, we're breeding people like pigs, and some pigs are more equal than others, to draw the Orwellian inference.
I have a question for you, because
sure.
In reading especially this last article that I came upon, and I know it's been around a while, well, I was thinking about all this monolith and megalith, and I started to think that really this is a continuation and a furtherance, whether it's a wink or a serious attempt by the Illuminati to continue with the whole idea of the Tower of Babel and the unification, or in this case I think you would say the reunification of all mankind with a capital M.
Sure. It would certainly appear so. First off, you have definitely inherent in their beliefs this monistic preoccupation with oneness. It's a doctrine of monism, which basically is a cosmological view that all things are one, and that means one, basically for them, one nation, which would be nation Earth, means one world religion, and it means one world economic system. But another thing that it means is one humanity, one man with a capital M, like you said. And for instance, if you read Wilmshurst's book, W.L. Wilmshurst, a Masonic scholar, in it he basically says, well, that the tradition of Freemasonry is also the tradition of what he calls, quote unquote, the collective soul, and that humanity at one time was a singularity, and that singularity experienced a diaspora, and human consciousness became individuated. Basically, you and I became our own entities unto ourselves, and that constituted a fall. So you see already parallels between parallels and distortions of the Eden account from Genesis. Of course, with this fall came what Wilmshurst calls the progressive densification of the material body and corresponding darkening of the mind and atrophy of spiritual consciousness. But at any rate, now he as other higher initiate Masons believe, and as the ruling class believes, we are on our way back from being this plurality towards being a singularity again. And you find this belief intrinsic in Big Bang cosmology, because Big Bang cosmology follows the same framework. We began as a singularity. The singularity, for no good reason, blows up, and now everything is a plurality. And possibly, I wouldn't be surprised if you saw contemporary science moving back towards the singularity again, and I believe we have with the transhumanist movement and convergent technologies projects.
And also all the religions that are popping up right now, most prominently, I guess, the Kabbalah.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
OTO, which we'll have Craig Heimbeckner on to talk about in his book, Blood on the Altar. But all of this involves with ascendancy of the soul, that they can be a god.
Exactly, absolutely. Well, Ray Kurzweil, a very prominent computer entrepreneur, also studies artificial intelligence. He believes, I believe it was in the book Age of Spiritual Machines, he believes that humanity can achieve immortality, technological immortality, by downloading his consciousness into cyberspace. And so you have this belief in cyber survival, and that essentially we can become gods, occupying both cyberspace and the corporeal vessels of our bodies, and continuing on and on and on. And you have sci-fi predictive programming pieces of literature that have also basically prophesied this. I say prophesied in quotes, with, for instance, Arthur C. Clarke's The City and the Stars, which also presents a scenario for the digital transformation of man. And also at the Denver University, you have this mural that's entitled Digital Transformation, and presents a goddess with her hands outstretched, and issuing forth from both hands is the double helix of DNA for humanity, and as it continues to ascend into the heavens, it begins to transform into ones and zeros. So again, you have this belief that we're headed towards a plurality and something like a hive mind, I would call it.
Well, this scientific dictatorship, which was coined, not that he's the originator of it, but it would seem he was the one who made it most popular, and that's Huxley.
Certainly.
Mentioning it in Brave New World Revisited, and also in that Berkeley speech called The Ultimate Revolution. But when Paul was on the last time, in Part 3, he kind of laid out a continuum of the generations, if you will, that have sought this very goal, which is scientific dictatorship. And in it, I'm going to just paraphrase, he had mentioned Cush, to Nimrod, to the Canaanites, to the Phoenicians, to the Venetian oligarchy. And we didn't go on beyond that, but within that and beyond that, you also would say that Darwin played a role in this whole mindset, did he not?
Absolutely. Well, with the transplantation of the Venetian oligarchy in Britain, you have also the emergence of the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons. Some scholars have said that those two orders rose concurrently. I've read other sources that say that one created the other. Whatever the case may be, both have very, very closely aligned doctrines, and both of those secret societies had been closely aligned. Well, at any rate, basically in 1662, under a royal warrant of Charles II, an organization that was ostensibly devoted to the scientific research and the broadening of human knowledge was formed, known as the British Royal Society. But we come to find out that virtually all of its founding members were Freemasons. Freemasonry basically was pretty much the progenitor of the British Royal Society, and I've read elsewhere that the British Royal Society was considered an auxiliary organization to the Freemasonic Lodge. But at any rate, all of its founding members were Freemasons, and basically T.H. Huxley, who was one of the members of the British Royal Society, became what was known as the bulldog, Charles Darwin's bulldog, right, and the official apologist for Darwinian evolution. But Darwinian evolution really was derivative of earlier precursory forms of evolutionary theory. Before that, you had Erasmus Darwin, who was Charles's grandfather, and also a Freemason, who had written the book Zoonomia, which basically delineated his evolutionary framework. And before him, several years before him, you have John Locke, yet another Freemason and a member of the British Royal Society, who refined the Hindu doctrine of reincarnation within the context of metaphysical naturalism to develop a theory of evolution. So this goes back quite a ways, but it was with Charles that the British Royal Society finally decided to proceed with a campaign of public indoctrination into evolutionary thought.
Well, I found it interesting in a book that was, the topic of which was drug politics, written by a former U.S. ambassador to Peru, David C. Jordan. And with this whole drug thing, and I believe, I got to get this off my tongue correctly, he called it the narco-statistician of global economy. But in it, he traced back to these very same characters, and that would be obviously not only Darwin, but Galton and T.H. Huxley and Wells and the rest.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I just found it interesting that he would go and kind of take a little sidebar digression and get involved in this. And that really tells me a lot if he's willing to devote a number of pages to that whole mindset.
Certainly.
And go ahead.
It's interesting that you would bring up the topic of drugs, particularly in conjunction with evolution, because other occultists, you mentioned Aleister Crowley's OTO earlier.
Right.
Other occultists have also considered drug usage as integral to the evolutionary process. Aleister Crowley wrote in Diary of a Drug Fiend, and I'm quoting him now. He said, "We obtained the ineffable assurances of the existence of a spiritual energy that worked its wondrous will in ways too strange for the heart of man to understand until the time should be right. We had attained a higher state of evolution," and unquote. And so basically you can see where it basically comes back into play with evolutionary theory. And the reason I believe that is because of course reincarnation is the spiritual counterpart of evolution. But you have in those Eastern religions also a proclivity towards drug use, and what many folks who have done narcotics or basically promote its use, such as Aldous Huxley with his book The Doors of Perception, have claimed is that it allows us to transcend the sensory distortions that we're so susceptible to in our cognizant frame of minds, and begin to join with what they call the absolute, which I would consider just another appellation for the Masonic collective soul, or the group soul, or the oversoul. And it's interesting because during the 60s we witnessed a promulgation of narcotics and an enormous narcotization effort on behalf of the CIA, which of course again has currents running into secret societies and occult characters.
Well, it seemed to me, and maybe you know something about this, that what I've read, it's almost as if Charles Darwin, kind of was a prop up. In other words, the powers that be wanted this to happen, and of course what he came out with went back to Erasmus was the grandfather, right? Right. And so he comes out with this, but I don't know. I mean, it's been intimated that he wasn't all that remarkable.
Yeah, he was. Of course, he flunked out of medical school. He had only really a degree in theology, and he was a relatively shy man. He was more of a recluse, and in fact, that was one of the reasons why T.H. Huxley had to pick up the banner for him. T.H. Huxley would basically go out and act as the battering ram against all those who would speak against Charles Darwin. And for the most part, Charles Darwin, even there are sources that suggest that he himself was pretty much doubtful of his own theory, especially later in life. It's also interesting to note that the character with which his theory of evolution finds part of its origins, Erasmus Darwin, his grandfather, was the founding member of what was known as the Lunar Society. And the Lunar Society was basically acted as a precursor to the British Royal Society. It was also intimately involved in subversive activities like the French Revolution. Erasmus Darwin himself had pledged his support to the radical Jacobins. So, all this time you have Charles Darwin, who's not necessarily a person of great scientific veracity, but you have all these ominous interests behind him and backing him, which for me suggests that the promulgation of Darwinism was largely part of a socio-cultural project as well.
You're listening to The Grassy Knoll with Viz and Philip D. Collins. who, along with his brother Paul, have written The Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship, an examination of epistemic autocracy from the 19th to the 21st century. Articles by the Collins can be read on the web, various venues. If you don't feel like doing a Google or a dogpile search, then go ahead out to biped.info. You'll find a number of them there. I'll have 3 up on my website by the time you folks are listening to this. Going back to Darwinianism, and I have to tell you, it was interesting in Edwin Black's book, War Against the Weak. He recounts an exchange between Galton and H.G. Wells. This gives you an idea where H.G. Wells' head is at.
Absolutely.
I don't know if we mentioned this, but Galton was chided for basically stopping at selective breeding when Wells wanted, population reduction and other things.
Yeah. H.G. Wells wanted to take it much, much further.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking these characters, they look like such, gentle old men.
Yeah.
and they've got the heart of an ice chest.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at these guys, and they look like they look like your prototypical grandpa, and yet you have them saying things like with H.G. Wells saying things like the men of the New Republic wouldn't be squeamish, they wouldn't have any problem inflicting pain and using whatever means necessary to maintain their dominance. And another closely aligned individual in that basic orbit is Bertrand Russell, who basically said, well, it may become desirable to spread another black plague to decimate world population. And in fact, I'm loosely paraphrasing him now. He said, well, the state of affairs in that world would be somewhat miserable, but as he puts it, what of it? So yeah, not exactly your portrait of a nice old man.
Oh yeah, I mean, and that's where I was going to. So it was rich that you would mention Russell, because in the epilogue of his book, The Intelligent Women's Guide to Socialism, I mean, in the back it says, if you don't like socialism, we can kill you.
Yeah,
we can execute you in a kindly manner. It's like an oxymoron.
Yeah, he basically says, that socialism is basically a form of coercive care, and we'll let the state care for you, and as long as you are a vital asset to the state, we'll keep you around, but at such point of which you become obsolete, you can be basically euthanized. And it's interesting that you bring up the socialism angle, because and I don't think any scholar would argue this, Darwinism was integral to the promulgation of socialism, both in its variants of fascism and communism.
Good point. And I'll tell you what, there's a local Tampa lawyer who is extremely, extremely anti-socialistic. Not that we all aren't, but he has a website. I believe it's Rex Curry, CURRY.net. And I mean, that's devoted to the socialistic symbolism and also the realities that have infiltrated the lives of United States citizens. But what he made a good point about, and I think we all tend to forget this, or most of us do, and that is when you think about the Nazi regime, or the Great Purging by Stalin and Mao, these are all from a government concept called socialism.
Absolutely.
So everybody thinks of socialism as being benign and nice, but all these characters, all these movements, all this killing was construed under the banner of socialism.
Absolutely. Not to mention, just in economic practice, socialism qualifies as essentially as state-sanctioned theft. I mean, I fail to see where the confiscation of my wealth or your wealth or anybody else's income is supposed to result in the greater good. I mean, paradoxically, that calls for an infringement on my right to prosper. And I think other philosophers have made a great argument against this. For instance, Ayn Rand. Now, I don't necessarily agree with everything that Ayn Rand says, but I mean, she basically laid it bare and everything. It's paradoxical indeed, because on one hand, they talk freedom and equality, but then we realize, well, equality doesn't always equate to freedom, and it's everybody's right to be unequal, and that some people are more productive than others. Now, I'm not meaning to assert that there are people who are useless or worthless in the greater schemes of things, but we all have different gifts, different talents, and different abilities, and so we direct those talents and abilities towards different different directives. And what socialism basically does is it sterilizes that uniqueness, because now everybody's the same, everybody's equal, and thus everybody's efforts must be directed towards the maintenance of the state, which of course they hold continually. This state will fade away, it'll wither away, but that never happens. I mean, no state that is enshrined and enthroned with such power as socialism, as that is bestowed upon it by socialism, will ever wither away.
No, and I'll tell you what's happening when I'm seeing at the university level. There are students who actually think that socialism is good because they've been frightened into what they see as the discrepancy between big-time winners and big-time losers in the capitalist system. And I think that dichotomy has been kind of blown out of proportion.
Absolutely.
But you know what? I'll tell you. I mean, I don't think anything that happens on TV is like spontaneous. Now, when I see Trump out there with "You're fired," here's yet another show on TV,
right?
Where there's this survival of the fittest mentality.
Absolutely.
And they're just absolutely, awful in jettisoning people off the shows, and that goes with all those survival series too on Fox. Yeah,
well, basically those reality shows are social Darwinian in nature. I mean, they're 100%. And what kills me about those is that most of the time they're not even based on meritocracy. They're not based on the individual merit of the contestants, of whoever's playing. It's based on who can lie and cheat the most.
And also with this that we see on TV and all these survival shows, and I would call them elimination shows to include, dates and all this other stuff.
Right.
What strikes me is the cruelty and the coldness of those who win. It's like we've always had bad losers, but now we got bad winners.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's an excellent point. I mean, and so the end result is, there used to be a day and an age when we would look to those who had quote unquote succeeded and decide to use them as an example to follow and everything. And many of the people who did in fact succeed and were the original entrepreneurs were men of great moral stature, men and women who had well-defined moral sensibilities. Now that whole paradigmatic template has been inverted, and now it's like the anti-hero has become the hero. All of a sudden, right. Now the villain has become that to which we strive after.
That's right. Going back to some of the points you made in an outline that you shared at the very beginning of this series, do you want to talk further about Darwinian evolution theory and its relation to the Nazis and to communism?
Absolutely, sure. Well, Darwinism shares with both fascism and communism, both Marx and Hitler, shares a dialectical framework. There's a Hegelian framework inherent to Darwinism. It works something like this: the species, which is the thesis, comes into conflict with nature, which is the antithesis, and basically the conflict of those gives rise to a synthesis, which is a brand new evolutionary refined creature, a new rise in the species. And this dialectical framework was also evident in Marxism, which you had basically the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie synthesizing in a classless utopia. It's also evident in a racial context, and probably even closer to the original Darwinian context in Hitler's Nazi Germany, because you have the Jews versus the German people. So this thesis and antithesis come into conflict, and they synthesize, giving rise to a brand new race, which of course Hitler thought would basically be the Aryan. But the close ties between communism and Darwinism are so numerous that it's almost impossible to enumerate them all. But the most significant ones I find are, for instance, in a letter written by Frederick Engels to Marx in December of 1859, he wrote, quote, "Darwin, whom I am just reading, is splendid," unquote. And Marx responded with, quote, "Although it is developed in the crude English style, this is the book which contains the basis in natural history for our view," unquote. So you have already the scientific foundation for socialism in Darwinism. And of course, eventually, fascism and communism and all the variants of socialism upon which were premised or premised themselves upon Darwinism would eventually start duking it out between each other. Eventually, they would start feuding between each other. And I believe that with the 20th century, we're witnessing the synthesis. We've witnessed the synthesis of the two, and with the 21st century, we're seeing that give rise to something new. With globalization and with basically the corporate Marxism of the World Bank and the IMF and institutions like that, which also employ Darwinian measures of population control and what have you by manipulating national economies and basically dismantling the industrial infrastructure of nations and calling off what they would consider undesirable populations.
And I think what we're seeing presently is another phase being unfolded that leads to a population reduction.
Absolutely.
And that is, whether real or not, and I do not believe it to be real, and that is the depletion of energy, oil, food, and water.
Yes, absolutely. And it's interesting because that whole situation, if it is in fact real, which there's a great body of evidence to suggest that it is not, but if we are in fact witnessing energy scarcities all along the board, I fail to see where the measures employed by the elite will solve the problem, because it was in fact the scientific doctrine of the elite that would have caused the problems to begin with. Scientists have, for the majority of the 20th century and the latter half of the 19th century, labored under the paradigm of materialism. And as you know, materialism basically precludes anything that does not basically constitute matter. It emphasizes the primacy of matter. And other scientists who have been investigating alternative forms of energy have been examining things outside this materialist paradigm and been discovering brand new advances that could possibly lead to brand new, more cleaner and effective forms of energy. because the dominant paradigm has been materialism, which again was promulgated by the elite, they haven't been able to really pursue it. Their research, is marginalized. They're marginalized. It's a problem that leads back to the ruling classes doctrine. And so for them to now suddenly suggest, measures by which to correct it is paradoxical, to say the least.
Well, I don't think it's a stretch to say in the future, and we're seeing it now with this recent GPS tracking of drivers in the Northwest, not to tax them at the pump, but to tax them by the miles they drive. And there's a control element there. I mean, you take a look now at airlines with retinal scans, and there's another control element there. It's always been told to me, and this is supposedly part of the whole the communist situation back in China, especially when Mao took over, and that is try to restrict travel as much as possible. But going on anyway, it's this idea of taxing for usage, so that if you eat too much or you do too much of this, it's all going to be taxed as a penalty for not being a good citizen.
Absolutely, it's like what Ayn Rand presented in Atlas Shrugged. Eventually, the more abundant the rules, the more corrupt the land becomes, because it becomes impossible for the average citizen, right, to live his or her life without breaking some rule.
Right.
And so eventually you have the criminalization of the entire population, and of course, a nation of criminals denotes a nation that is a prison, and that's essentially what you have had happen, right, in China and in communist Russia and Germany, Nazi Germany, was the citizenry became prisoners within their own prison.
Yeah, and it's funny because Judge Brandeis had said that the most precious right an American has is the right to be left alone.
Absolutely.
And I keep telling people, think about that, because I also think about that line from Cool Hand Luke.
Oh, yeah.
Paul Newman says, "Why don't you stop being so good to me?"
Absolutely.
And that's it. It's like, leave me alone.
Exactly. Even if your motives are altruistic, who would know better, for myself than myself? Who would know better what is right for me than myself alone? Because for a government, first off, anytime you want to screw something up, anytime you really want to screw something up, you just get a committee to work on it. And everything. Well, now imagine, dozens and dozens of committees and everything. All of a sudden, I mean, you think you got problems now and everything. I mean, to put a spin on I think it was, the old mantra, no taxation without representation. It was pretty bad, then. That's why the original founding fathers revolted. But now we have taxation with representation. So, I mean,
it's worse.
Yeah, it's gotten a lot worse.
If you don't mind, since we're looking at about maybe 10 minutes more,
sure.
Instead of touching upon Cecil Rhodes, which is a fascination of mine, and the United Nations and such, turning back to the scientific dictatorship and the world yet to come, I guess I had exchanged emails with Paul about what kind of caste system or what kind of alpha and betas or whatever await us, and I had written to him that a listener said that there'll be genetic modification not only for the purity and the long-lastingness of the elite class, but to have a certain worker class that would need less in terms of food, water, and needs. And I just want to say one more thing, and I'm going to throw it to you, that I had read a transcript between a Dr. Daigle and Butch Paul, who's on the Genesis Communication Network, and he was talking about what has already been worked on is the creation of a cyborg class.
That's a very interesting observation. Today we have the transhumanist movement which of course boasts such luminaries as sociologist William Sims Bainbridge, and has been closely affiliated with government-sponsored research into convergent technology, cybernetics, nanotechnology, what have you. And one of their ideologues, Princeton University professor Lee Silver, basically predicted that the future would witness the rise of what he calls the gen-rich class, or a genetically rich class. And meanwhile, there would be an underclass known as the natural class. But this is what he said, and I'm quoting now, quote, "All aspects of the economy, the media, the entertainment industry, and the knowledge industry will be controlled by members of the gen-rich class. Naturals will work as low-paid service providers or as laborers," unquote. Now that's as long as the naturals serve a purpose in the world. But according to Darwinian doctrine, which to a certain extent underpins the doctrine of transhumanism, extinctions basically are an integral part of evolution, and the transhumanist movement has already pretty much predicted a coming extinction, and that extinction will be the extinction of the naturals. Dr. Richard Lynn, the emeritus professor at University of Ulster, basically, and another transhumanist ideologue said, and I'm quoting him now, "What is called for here is not genocide, the killing off of the population of incompetent cultures, but we do need to think realistically in terms of phasing out such peoples. Evolutionary progress means the extinction of the less competent," unquote. And that basically includes the vast majority that constitute naturals that do not fall within the orbit of the gen-rich class.
Well, another element of this worker class, or you want to call them Morlocks or whatever.
Sure.
And I think Huxley was advancing this, that either through drugs or now in this technocratic age, the use of virtual reality,
absolutely,
or unreality, to make everyone's existence seem a little bit better, since for the most part the grunts are always going to be wearing gray pajamas.
That's right. It's very interesting that you bring up drugs too, because William Sims Bainbridge himself said, and I'm quoting now. Sorry for all the quotes, but these are just damning quotes. He said, quote, "Techniques such as genetic engineering, psychoactive drugs, and electronic control of the brain make possible a transformation of the species into docile, fully obedient, safe organisms," unquote. Well, right there, I mean, pretty much encapsulates the thoroughly synopsizes the agenda, which will be, the progressive anesthetization of the natural class, which you and I, naturally constitute, on their way towards the eventual slaughter, eventual phasing out, as it was stated earlier.
Well, now I think back to what I thought were two innocuous shows, and they may have been at that time. But what was it, The Bionic Man and Woman?
Yes.
With Lee Majors?
Yeah, Lee Majors, yeah.
And now I'm saying, again, here's a situation, quite possibly, where the writers of that show I think they were probably privy to the plan, or they were shown that it was possible. Again, this marriage between supposed science fiction and the reality. And
absolutely. Sure. And it's very interesting that you bring that up. There's a role-playing game on the market. Role-playing games are basically a form of psychodrama where people who play them put on mask, essentially, and in their own mind become the characters that they play. And while this seems innocuous enough, like D&D, Dungeons & Dragons, and what have you, the providence of nerds and geeks and what have you, it blurs the lines between fantasy and reality. And to give you an excellent example of that, one of the role-playing games that's on the market is called Cyberpunk. And I knew a avid player of the game, and he told me that he would have no problem with cybernetic augmentation of his body. He thought it was cool. And not that I have a problem with cybernetic augmentation if it could, solve problems like blindness or being crippled.
Right.
But when we're talking about, grafting stuff on like, machine guns and what have you, and stuff that really has no further application than dubious motives would suggest, now we're talking a whole other different thing.
Yeah, and another thing that struck me was that I had a discussion with Harry, and Harry has a number of student workers. One of them is very astute, computer-wise and elsewhere, and we were talking about virtual realities and Huxley, and he kind of tipped us off, or rather made us think about how you could experience anything that you wanted.
Absolutely.
With the technology that's out there now and will be improved, so that actually your life outside your life would probably be more gratifying.
That's right. And it's interesting that you brought that up, because there was an episode of Married with Children where the one character, Bud Bundy, goes into virtual reality goggles, right, and comes across the woman of his dreams, and he says something to the effect that with a woman like you in here, why would I ever want to go back there?
A little conditioning element from Fox again.
Yep. Again, you have intimations of this electronic psychocognitive hive, and the further removal of humanity from reality itself.
We'll leave on this note, but and pick up hopefully in another segment.
Sure.
Now, when we look at the magic that's always been out there, for centuries ago and even now, it does really incorporate both technology and pharmacos.
That's right.
And now we're going to see the melding of both to build the, quote, perfect life for all the lumpins, aren't we?
That's right. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because pharmakos is derived from the original Hebrew word pharmakia, which meant sorcery.
That's right. And
technology is derived from the Greek root techne, which basically means craft, and has been associated with the word Wicca, which means basically that's derived from the word wicker, which means to bend, as in the bending of reality. So again, it's like what you said. It's this magical subcurrent in the dominant state of affairs.